Hello everyone. We have just concluded our video playlist with about 40 games. Uh, win with the Closed Sicilian. I hope you enjoyed that. Uh, I wanted to put in a supplemental game that I thought was very interesting, and it's from 2018. Actually, August 25th, 2018, from the Russian Super Final to be exact. So it's a brand new game. And with the white pieces, Grandmaster Dmitry Andreikin, who's 28 years old, rated 2710. And with the black pieces, Ne2 rated 2634 and 33 years old. So let's look at a modern application of the closed Sicilian between two strong grandmasters. So here we go. So the game started out e4 c5, knight c3, and then the move a6. Okay, which is perfectly playable, slightly unusual, but black's plan is still the same, to play b5 at some point. g3, and there it is, b5, bishop g2, bishop b7, knight ge2, e6. And you see, in spite of black's play here, white is still playing a normal, uh, variation in the closed Sicilian. For those of you that would be interested, this will fall under the lines with knight e2 that I discuss in the closed Sicilian playlist. All right, so look up systems with the move knight e2 and you'll find similar type of positions. Now here, and this is shows the flexibility of the closed Sicilian. Andreikin plays d4 instead of playing the move d3. So d4, c takes, knight takes, and now b4 hitting the knight, knight a4, knight f6. So we see this double attack on the e4 pawn. Andreikin just simply plays c4. Black continues on with his development with d6. Now this pawn can be taken, but it's a little bit awkward for black and uncomfortable, and he probably wind up losing more than he gained in this position. So for instance, bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, knight takes e4, and a move like queen f3 is quite annoying with the pin on the rook on a8, for example. And of course, black can play a move like f5 here, and hold on to his position, or he can play even d5 here. But again, with the lag and development and the awkwardly, and I think this move is a little worse than f5, the lag and development combined with the this move is probably a little better. The lag and development combined with the weakness in the pawn structure, I still like white's position better here, and believe that white definitely has compensation positionally for the pawn. So I think it was wise for black to play d6, but it is always important as far as when it comes to grabbing the central pawn. If you can get it, you want to get it. But of course, you don't want to destroy your position here. So a couple of more moves was played, castle, and then again, knight bd7. So you see black is just going on completing his development. Uh, Here's another variation. So again, if he goes for the pawn again, You run into the same difficulty, and the principle is basically due to black's lack of development. He runs into trouble. The rook on a8 is exposed, so the knight can't just go back to f6. So again, this is just an example line, just a sample line. And then, for instance, queen e2, just exploiting the pin. The knight planning on playing f3. And then you could see that black is just in a whole lot of trouble, and it just stems from just not being developed enough, right? And again, that all boils down to the old principle, um, position first, then material, or don't go grabbing pawns in the opening, etc., like that. So you see black adhering to that and just developing. So now queen e2, e5, knight f5, g6, knight to e3. And again, there's another opportunity to grab that pawn, but black instead plays bishop c6. Again, bishop takes, takes, knight takes, and this is, just a sample line. It's a knight d5, knight ef6, and bishop g5. Again, white has good positional compensation for the pawn. Maybe you look to follow up at some point in typical closed Sicilian fashion with f4. And just opening up the position, rook a to e1, and then followed by f4. So black uh, declines the pawn offer again, attacks the knight on a4, and now he decides to double white's pawns and give up the bishop pair. And now knight c4, attacking the a pawn and the e pawn at the same time. f4, again, it's interesting how white continuously, um, presses the position. He doesn't worry about the e pawn, and rightfully so. With such a good lead in development, the concentration is on opening the position for the pieces, because your lead in development is no good if the position remains closed. Bishop g7, f5, and you can now see the typical closed Sicilian motifs. Castles, knight d5, hopping in the weak square there. Black grabs a pawn, and maybe he could have did without that a pawn, but now there's a pin. Bishop g5, knight c3, and this was black's idea. Knight takes c3, b takes c3, and now rook a c1, h6, asking the bishop the question of where you going now. Bishop e3, queen a5, now queen d3, pressing the d6 pawn, knight g4, and capturing the pawn. And now we're in the end game here. The bishop pair is going from white now. And now let's just take a quick stock of this position now that we've transitioned in the end game. As you can see, we have opposite colored bishops, which is usually very drawish in nature, and we also have equal pawns. However, the quality of the pawns is not equal, and white has a better pawn structure, and this is primarily due to black's weakness on the d5 square and the weakness of the d6 pawn itself. And usually the case with backward pawns is that if the player attacking the backward pawn can control the square in front of that weak pawn, then that pawn is truly backward. If he can't control that square, in this case d5, if white cannot control that square and black is able to just push the pawn or whatever, then that pawn is really not that weak. In this case, That pawn is really weak. You see the Marazzi bind type situation with pawns on c4 and e4, practically guaranteeing that pawn on d6 will not advance. And so all white has to do is build up on the pawn. So therefore, black to counter must not worry so much about that pawn, but try to distract white and attack white's weaknesses, mainly the pawn on c4. Another feature in the position that I want to mention is also that um, both bishops are pretty much of the same quality right now. So um, it's really going to be a matter of the pawn structure and the activity of the rooks at this stage of the game. All right, so both players must try to improve their bishops, but right now, um, the fight for the open files is very important for the rooks right now. So black played bishop to f6, rook d3, getting right on that d6 pawn, protecting rook a d8, and it's good to get your opponent on the defensive. Notice how the rook on d3 is attacking, the rook on d8 passive. F takes g6, F takes g6, so there's the open file, okay? And so right there in a few moves, white is taking care of the problems of the rooks. Now to improve his worst piece, which is the bishop on g2. Problem solved. Bishop h3. Notice also, uh, besides bringing the bishop to a beautiful diagonal, it controls the c8 square. So it's difficult for black to put a rook on c8 and attack the pawn on c4. King g7, bishop e6, and the idea is to just simply bring the bishop into d5, protecting both pawns on c4 and e4 while simultaneously blockading the d6 pawn. Therefore, then he'll move his rooks to an open file where he can look forward to penetrating the position. Rook fe8, bishop d5, and rook b8. So immediately black is the first to occupy that open b file. Rook to a3, again attacking the pawn. Rook b6, so guaranteeing black's passivity. Now h4 and h5. King g2 and rook eb8. So here we can see that black is able to penetrate the white position now by occupying that b file. H3. And now rook to f8. Rook f2. Rook fb8. So now we're kind of at a standstill here. Rook f3. And white's idea here is to contest the b file now. All right. Rook goes back. Black is looking to draw here, and white is looking for a little more. So finally, he gets his chance. He contests the file. Rook fb3, and now bishop d8. And here's a nice tactical shot from black. c5. And the idea is just simply to break up these pawns and prove that they are weak, because this will allow white to penetrate in the position after the exchange of rooks. So rook takes, bishop takes, and now d takes c5, and there it is. So white's rook is actually the first to penetrate in the position now. Rook f3, rook a8, bishop e7, rook a7, king f8, another check, king g7, rook a7, He's buying time here, and of course he avoids the draw and plays now bishop to d5, again protecting the e pawn and the a2 pawn. Notice again, although white's bishop is doing some defensive duty, it's also in an excellent position. That bishop is probably in the best optimal position on the chessboard right now because it's controlling vital squares in the black position, and it's defending the pawns on a2 and e4, which keep white's rook free and active. Meanwhile, um, black's dark square bishop is just totally defensive. Totally defensive. If you can put that dark square bishop, say, on d4, it would be doing the same thing that white is doing in the position. So there's just the main difference in the position right there is the quality of uh, of those bishops. Okay, and notice also for white, the a pawn can advance freely without problem right now, whereas black cannot really advance his c pawn because it would just be captured. So that bishop on d5 is really very powerful. And again, comparing the rooks, rook on the seventh versus the rook on the sixth rank. So we have to give white uh, the nod right there because that rook is definitely um, restricting the white king, and also it's protecting the pawn along with the bishop and allowing it to advance. Black seeks to break out g5, h takes g5, bishop takes g5. So we see all three pawns now are separated and all isolated. And isolated pawns need to be protected by pieces. And although white's pawns are isolated, also white's pawns are better protected at this point than black's. Okay, so and the reason is because white's pieces are more aggressively placed. Now, white black has an idea here in the position of moves like bishop f4, exploiting the pin and attacking the g pawn. So king g2. So we see the attack here, and now the rook has to move somewhere. Now he moved to c3, and you can see once he moves off of the f file, the f7 square is now vulnerable, and we see this check come into play. And again, the this game is decided just by the fact that white's pieces are just a little more active than black's. Rook f5, attacking the bishop. Now we see rook c2, and that check is not a big deal for white because again, the light square bishop of white protects all the pawns. Meanwhile, the dark square bishop cannot protect the pawns, and you see now the pawn on e5 and h5 hanging. Rook simply takes c4. The other pawn drops c3, and this is black's only hope. Rook e6, and this is so that the rook can transfer here and get behind the pawn. Bishop d6, and now just a4. The other pawn starts to march. Bishop c7, king g4, and the 3 pawns to 1 is just too much even for the opposite colored bishops here. Rook c4, king d8, king f5, now getting the king involved and also preparing to march the g pawn up the board. Even here, it's a lost cause still for black, even if he was to try to capture this pawn at this point, as the f pawn, excuse me, the e pawn or the a pawn could just continue its march up the board. So king d7 was played, bishop to e6, king d8, king f6, last gasp effort, bishop f5 blocks the check, rook f3 protects the pawn and attacks the g pawn, and white ended the game with g4 as black had seen enough. So that's a supplemental game. I'll add that to the playlist of win in the Closed Sicilian. But you can see a modern application of it at high grandmaster level. And again, it's a great system for avoiding a lot of theory, and it just forces you and your opponent to play chess, and it's a good game. So again, I hope you enjoyed that video. Please like, subscribe, check the links down below, and I will see you soon on the next video.